It's now time for the Grobstein and Schuster Express on 1252 Sports Chicago. All aboard! And now, here are your hosts, Les Grobstein and David Schuster.
And welcome into the latest edition of the Grobstein Schuster Express. I'm David Schuster, and that handsome gentleman to my right here on the screen is Mr. Les Grobstein. He, of course, is the overnight host on The Score, WSCR Radio. And we are brought to you by, as always, Nick and Ivy's Brewery, located at 1026 South State Street in Lockport, and more from our sponsor in just a little bit. And Les, we have so much to talk about today. We are guest-free this evening. We're doing this live, and people can hear it, of course, recorded through the week as well. So I'm sure you'll have lots of thoughts in mind, and we're going to get to the Cubs and White Sox and everything else locally in just a moment. But it was a hell of a tournament on the PGA today. I'm sure you kept abreast of everything that happened at the U.S. Open. And what a story. Jon Rahm, of course, winning the tournament with a couple of birdies. And boy, did he have a fist pump on that 18th hole when he took the lead for good at 6 under par. And that's what the winning score was. And he needed that birdie to win the tournament. But, of course, everybody should know, if they're following Jon Rahm and the PGA, he was leading the Memorial a couple of tournaments ago, and he would have won it. He had the 6-shot lead going into the final round. And unfortunately, he was, for him at least, he was diagnosed with COVID. He had to go into protocol. He had to withdraw from the tournament, and he was due to win $1.6 million if he would have hung on, and he would have, to win that tournament in Ohio. And then he was in isolation until early this week. And he comes back out less and he wins the tournament. What a great story for him and the PGA.
The thing that we were all watching for to see how Lefty would come out and how he would look from the first round on. He was done. He was totally done. What was he, about 7 or 8 strokes out, and that was the end of that. And then you had two guys who hate each other, and they weren't involved. I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't involve either one of them coming down the stretch. So that's two things that happened. No Lefty and no two guys that actually were kind of at each other's throats.
You're talking about, of course, Brooks Koepka and, oh gosh, I'm spacing out now. Who's the other guy? I'm spacing out.
Well, they don't like each other.
DeChambeau. I'm sorry. I just spaced out for a second. Bryson DeChambeau.
If there was any of the two that would win it, I would have thought it might have been Koepka, but it was not, and we saw what ended up happening.
Well, both those guys were on the leaderboard, but they faltered down the stretch, on the back nine of today's final round. And as far as Mickelson, I believe he finished at 11 over par, and you're right, he was pretty much out of it after day one. But, think about this, Les. There's been 3 major tournaments on the PGA circuit already this season. And there's been incredible stories already in all 3. Hideki Matsuyama won the Masters. He's the first Japanese player to win a major tournament.
He might be the best player on the planet right now, Matsuyama.
He's certainly up there. I mean, there's so many great players on the PGA. That's why it's just amazing that no one can dominate anymore. Then, of course, Phil Mickelson did win the PGA. And the story, of course, he's the oldest player ever to win a major tournament at just short of 51 years old. And then Jon Rahm, like I said, comes out of COVID protocol after what happened at the Memorial a couple of weeks ago, and he wins the U.S. Open today. So the British Open is coming up, in about 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it is. I can't wait to hear what story happens out there.
I'm sure we will. And again, people don't call it the British Open anymore, except
the Open Championship.
You're right, exactly.
Yeah. And of course, you've been to England or Great Britain numerous times for sporting events. Where have you gone I haven't had the privilege, but where have you gone when you've gone over there?
Just to the Bears-Cowboys game in '86. And that was at Wembley Stadium. And they redid it, so it's not quite the same facility as it was in '86. They redid the whole stadium, kind of like what they did with Soldier Field here in Chicago, totally redoing it. The only difference is, in the case of what they redid at Chicago Soldier Field, and that's another story too. Obviously, they screwed it up, and it's that's one of the reasons they possibly need to get out of there. Don't know if it's going to happen, but the bottom line is in England. That's the only real thing I've been to. Lots of things actually. I've been to more in Paris, and that's a place that you had a wonderful event on a subway train in Paris too, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not a sports related. Although
it kind of became.
Yeah, well, I almost decked somebody on the metro in Paris. That's a whole different story. Not really sports. It's funny, you perfectly led into the next story I want to talk about. And again, we'll get to the Cubs and the White Sox in just a moment. And a reminder, we have Stump the Grobber and an expanded Stump the Grobber on today's podcast because we are guest free. So I figured I'd throw a lot of questions at you, but that's later on. But you led in perfectly talking about a potential new Bears stadium. And of course, it's not going to happen right away if it even happens at all. But you saw earlier this week that the Bears put in a bid along with, I don't know how many other entities. I'm sure there was like numerous ones to purchase the land where Arlington Park or Arlington International is currently located. And if they end up, having the high bid or the bid that is picked, they will build a new stadium there. And, we both have seen Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, say that it's not going to happen, Les. But in reality, the Bears
has to say that. She has to say that.
I know she has to say it. And Mayor Daley has said that in the past, both mayors, I'm sure, in the past. But the reality is that the league, if it was profitable for the Bears and is profitable and, exposure-wise also for the Bears to move outside the city, the league would okay it.
I know that the league would not like to see them move outside, but as of right now, I'll believe it when I see it. I'm going to stick to what I've said all along. I don't believe it's going to happen anytime soon. If it does, it'll be 3, 4, 5, 6 years at least until it would be built and be ready to go.
Yeah, it would be a long down the road if or when it ever happens. It'd be perfect for you. You're almost right down the street from there.
Oh, exactly. And I've had a couple other people say that I would have a very short trip. It'd be kind of cool to not have to go downtown. But for a lot of people that are on the south side, southwest side, and people from northwest Indiana, people that live in the city, coming up here would be probably a lot more difficult for them. But you do have interstate you have the tollway, as we all know first, the Northwest Tollway. And then that takes you down to Route 53, and Route 53 takes you to Euclid, and you're right there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you're absolutely right also, Les, when you say, I'll believe it when I see it, if we ever see it, which I'm sort of skeptical myself. All right, let's just say it doesn't happen, and the Bears have to go to plan B, C, D, or E, whatever it is. And can they refurbish Soldier Field any more than what they've already done? Or is there even yet another place in Chicago? And I don't know where it would be, Les, of building another stadium in Chicago.
My question is, those columns and stuff, are they still basically untouchable? That's one of the reasons they had to build a spaceship in it. Have they been able to get around that? Could they tear those down and redo the whole place? That's my question.
What do they call it? It's a landmark, and it's probably protected by a bunch of, I don't know what it is. The same thing I think at Wrigley also. That's why they couldn't do certain things at Soldier Field, like what you're talking about. I don't know. But, can you expand that stadium anymore? And if they want to, okay.
No, you can't.
So, the Bears want to expand their capacity for having fans at a game. Right now, they have the smallest stadium in the NFL.
You still can't have a Super Bowl or a Final Four there, no matter how much. Outdoors in the wintertime, in late January, early February, I asked Roger Goodell this at a Super Bowl a few years ago. I said, the way it is now. And he says, well, my wife is from Chicago, and it's a great place. And he gave a bogus answer. He didn't say yes or no. He was just afraid to say, no, it can't. And he just didn't want to make any waves at that point. But right now, it's the smallest seating capacity. It's outdoors. They didn't put a retractable roof on, nor could they. It would have been impossible to do it with the columns and everything else they have right now.
Okay, again, I don't see this happening for somewhere, who knows how many years down the road. But if they were to do anything, whether in Chicago or something else, let's just say they try to expand Soldier Field. Are we going to go back?
How?
I don't know. I'm not an architect.
They can't do it.
Okay, you're probably right, but then again, I never thought that they could do some of the things that they did at Wrigley Field. Also, I mean, they went down at Wrigley Field. I'm not saying they can go down at Soldier Field either, but what some architects are able to do and engineers, it's unbelievable. But what my question then again is, let's just say there's a feasibility of doing anything. Would we have to go back down to Champaign for another year, or where else would we go?
Why did Green Bay get to stay in Lambeau Field when they redid it after the 2001 season? In 2002, they were still playing at Lambeau Field, yet the Bears had to leave Soldier Field. They had to do it, and they had to go down to Champaign. Why? That is absolutely bogus. Why did they have to do that? And that meant they didn't have and they had a great season in 2001. And by going down to Champaign, they did a great job there. I'm not knocking the U of I. Bottom line is the Bears were hurt by having to play the whole season there. And then by 2003, when they moved into the new Soldier Field, any advantage they had was gone. And that was basically, if I were Dick Duran, I'd be pretty ticked off because he had that thing on the roll. And then all of a sudden, they were rolling into the toilet.
Well, you and I, of course, went down to Champaign, and we've talked about this numerous times. I think the people who profited the most monetarily were the state police because they were pulling people over on 57 in Ford County like no tomorrow.
Yeah, like they used to pull the Bears over on their way back from Platteville, the old Platteville 150 on Route 20. Remember that?
I do remember that. I also do remember because you and I went to numerous Bears games at Lambeau Field, and you're right. I mean, they expanded the stadium while they were still playing in it, but maybe that stadium was more conducive for, I don't know, Les. I'm not an engineer. I couldn't
seated 59,000, and basically so did Notre Dame Stadium. They kept playing there, and both of those, Lambeau and Notre Dame Stadium, seat over 80,000. The Bears, they have the smallest seat capacity in the NFL.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of Soldier Field. Don't get me wrong. I still think it was more of a dump when it was the old Soldier Field.
We used to call it the Termite Palace in the old place, prior to 81 when they redid the press box there. And we used to have to get a tetanus shot after every game because for sitting there for a few hours, all of a sudden you'd need a pair of tweezers to pull all those pieces of wood out of your rear end.
And you remember when the quote-unquote new Soldier Field was built. I mean, the press box is no bargain right now, and people don't really care about that, but we'll just bring
all the new stadiums, they put them either in the corner or in the end zone. Phoenix is in the end zone. Arizona, like we said, there's a couple others that are in the end zone.
But you remember when they first built it, the press box, it was so narrow that we had a hard time literally walking down the aisles to get to our seats because
it's still not very good. It's still
it's not. It's not. And the food's no good either, but that's a whole nother story. All right, we'll move on from the Soldier Field.
They had box lunches during this last year, but that was a reason that they did that because of the pandemic.
That's correct. We'll see what happens upcoming. All right, from the stadium to the team, we'll talk real quickly about the team. They just had their mini camp. I guess the next thing will be, the summer reporting camp and all that kind of stuff. And Justin Fields still is getting a lot of attention. However, Matt Nagy has gone on record, and I'm sure, listen, he can change his mind also. We both know that. But he said, absolutely, Andy Dalton will be his starting quarterback to start the season.
Well, they said that Mike Glennon was going to be the quarterback the entire season. He was, and they had save after save after save situations. And what ended up happening? Fourth game. He was out. He was so bad that ultimately Glennon was gone. Trubisky came in, and he was not ready to play NFL football at that point. But they put him in because they had no choice. I mean, first of all, it was screwed up from the beginning by Ryan Pace when he passed up on Mahomes, he passed up on Watson, and he went with Trubisky, and that whole thing turned out to be a farce.
All right, let me ask you, Les. There's been a lot of bad contracts in sports over the years. Has Mike Glennon's $18.5 million for the 4 games he played in a Bears uniform among, if not the worst contract in sports history?
Among, I wouldn't say the worst. There have been lots of bad situations there, but it was definitely bad.
You're hard pressed to come up with another one.
No, there have been some others that have been terrible, but the Bears have given away a lot of money for a long time.
Okay, but he got $4.75 million, I think, for each game that he played, and there were only 4 games. That's pretty bad.
Well, yeah, and I mean, Mike Glennon could not play, but I mean, when they made the deal They traded away their first-round pick to the Green Bay Packers. I mean, they've done that a couple of times. They did that back in '89, after '89, when they lost the coin flip for Terry Bradshaw, and we know what ended up happening there. And they got 3 washed-up players in return for the second pick overall. Green Bay got a player out of that, was with them for probably a good decade. The Bears have made some terrible moves over the years, and we're going all the way back to when Hallis and company was still there.
Our producer, Alan, just put up on the screen that Bobby Bonilla is still getting paid by the Mets. And yes, he is. I think it's $1 million payment annually, and I don't know how many more years. You remember when Howard Porter was signed by the Bulls, and I think he was getting paid for some 25 years also, Les?
But not anywhere near that kind of money. The thing with Howard Porter, basically, he had been drafted by both the Bulls and by Pittsburgh in the ABA, and he ended up agreeing. He signed contracts with both teams. Ultimately, the Bulls had to make a trade with Pittsburgh, the first NBA team to make a trade with an ABA team. Remember the player they had to get rid of? And it was a big nothing, but you know who they traded to Pittsburgh to finally get the rights to Porter?
Oh, this is like Stump the Schuster now. No, I don't remember, but I do remember the Pittsburgh. They were the Pipers, weren't they?
Condors.
Okay, well,
they were the Pipers. Then they were the they were the Pittsburgh Pipers. They moved to Minneapolis to Bloomington, Minnesota. They were the Minnesota Pipers for 1 year. Went back to Pittsburgh. They were the Pipers. Then they changed their name to the Condors. And the player we're talking about is Paul Ruffner that the Bulls traded. He was terrible.
Paul Rushner?
Ruffner, Ruffner.
Okay, well, I don't remember him, and maybe he was so bad I don't want to remember him.
No, he wasn't even good enough to be bad. He was awful.
Alan has put a couple more things up. He says Joakim Noah's contract with the Knicks is pretty bad, and it is. I mean, he got a lot of money. You don't have to cry poor for Joakim Noah. By the way, this isn't interactive. If you're looking at this right now live on either YouTube or Facebook, we are interactive. So if you have questions of either myself or Les, or thoughts just on anything, just go ahead and type it in, and we'll put it up on the screen. All right, let's move over to baseball. I wouldn't exactly call it revenge by the Houston Astros, because a 4-game series in the middle of June, as opposed
to the World Series,
the World Series is not on equal par. But the Astros can have bragging rights for the last 4 days. They swept the White Sox out. The White Sox coming back down to earth. They went into Houston with the best record in baseball. They got swept in 4 games, losing by a composite 27-8 score. And it was just a matter of time before some losses. And by the way, when they've matched up against good teams, they have taken their lumps. I mean, the White Sox have beat up on a lot of the lesser teams. There's no question about that. So it's something to watch going forward. But eventually, we all knew, Les, with Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, and then Nick Madrigal, being out for extended periods of time, and Madrigal for sure for the season, and maybe the other 2 guys as well. At some point, it's going to catch up with you. Your pitching can only hold off so long. So, I'm not surprised that the White Sox have been in a little bit of skid here. They go to Pittsburgh now for a couple of games, and then they come back home to play, I believe, Seattle on the weekend. We'll see if they bounce back.
Those are 2 really bad teams, as we all know.
Yep.
As far as the Pirates, they have at times in interleague play given the White Sox fits. At times. Again, we're talking over the last 20 some odd years, since pretty much 1997. Then there have been other times that they've beaten them up, but for the most part, they've given them some problems.
Speaking of bad teams, I'm looking it up as we speak. Arizona lost again today, and I'm going to look this up real quickly. I think they've lost. It's definitely they've lost
17.
They've lost 17 in a row. My God.
They still have their road losing streak going too.
Yeah, and that's over 20, almost 25.
Dodgers barely beat them 9-8.
I think they've lost 35 of their last 40 games. At one point, they were 2 games over 500. Now they're just, I think they've been eliminated from next season's standings already, if I'm not mistaken. I'm kidding when I say that. But obviously.
Well, if they haven't been, they ought to be.
I think I couldn't conceive of a team being that bad. 17 in a row. Although, the Orioles came to town one time riding a 20-some-odd game losing streak and finally snapped
the White Sox.
And finally won against the White Sox. All right. So, are you confident that the White Sox, the Sox lead went from 5.5 to 2.5 this weekend. And Cleveland is in town here the next couple of days, but not against the White Sox, rather against the Cubs. So Sox fans will probably be rooting
And
for the
Bieber
Cubs.
is not. Bieber is out right now, so the Cubs will not have to face him.
But White Sox fans, and I know it's blasphemous for them to do this, but they're going to be rooting for the White Sox, or for the Cubs rather, the next couple of days.
Well, we've had situations like that before. A good friend of yours and mine, Dave Wills, he's the voice of the Tampa Bay Rays. He is a longtime White Sox fan. He hates the Cubs. He's made it quite clear over the years. He doesn't make any bones about that. And I've asked him a couple of times, what if there was an interleague game where if the Cubs were playing the White Sox and the Rays and the Sox were in a battle? He didn't even let me finish the question. He knew what I was going to. He says, I would root for the Cubs in that case. He says, I know who pays my bills. I've got to root for my team.
Absolutely. All right.
It's got to make him sick to his stomach to root for the Cubs to beat anybody, because he's a White Sox fan and he absolutely despises the Cubs.
He really does, and we've both known him a long time. All right.
He's a great guy. He's one of our favorites. He was a former Crass teammate of ours. He's from Oak Lawn, and like I said, when the Rays are not involved, he wants to see the Sox do well.
Speaking of the Cubs, though, they lost two out of three over the weekend to Miami, also one of the lesser teams in Major League Baseball. They did win via shutout this afternoon, 2-0. Craig Kimbrell. I mean, the Cubs. If the Cubs stay where they are, I'm sure they'll keep Kimbrell. But that's a real decision that they're going to have to think long and hard about, because Craig Kimbrell is going to be coveted by every team in Major League Baseball. He has absolutely been lights out all season long, and he could actually restock your minor league system and probably get some major league players along with it. But Les, if they're at the trading deadline where they are right now, he's not going anywhere.
The history of the Marlins, they came into the league a long time ago in the early 90s, the same year that the Rockies came into the National League. The Marlins and the Cubs met in the 2003 League Championship Series. We know what happened in that situation. The Marlins ended up winning it in 7. Last year, they met in the playoffs again. It was a 2-game deal. It was best of 3, but the Marlins, they hold them to like 1 run in the 2 games, and 1 game they even shut them out.
They did.
And now here they are going at it again in interleague competition. The Marlins and the Cubs, of course, they're both National League teams. But the Marlins, they've come into Chicago to Wrigley Field and done pretty well.
They have. And, the Cubs have not been hitting very well in this month of June. I would say going into June, I was pleasantly surprised by a lot of guys' averages, but they've nosedived during this month of June. But they're still tied for first along with Milwaukee. Now, that division is pretty good.
Milwaukee has been bad, too. Milwaukee finally beat Colorado, but it doesn't matter how bad the Rockies are. When teams go into Coors Field, anything can happen. Teams go into that place, and they get their rear ends kicked. Milwaukee held on today, and they didn't even go to Josh Hader. He wasn't available for today, and so they ended up still holding on and getting the victory after they blew a 6-run lead. Milwaukee has had some problems with some really bad teams, and some good teams have beaten them too. If they were any good right now, the Cubs could be 6, 7, 8 games out, and they still could be talking about possibly having a sale. As of right now, they're not selling anything.
I agree with you. The division, the National League Central, is very bunched. You do have the Cubs and Milwaukee tied for the lead as of Sunday evening. Cincinnati, I believe, lost today. St. Louis is playing a doubleheader. They won this afternoon. I think they're losing tonight's game so far.
They did lose 1-0 in the second.
Okay, so the Cubs pick up a half a game on them. But the bottom line is that division, minus Pittsburgh, of course, is very bunched up. Do you anticipate it'll stay that way all season?
Division. Let's be honest. Let's call it like it is. It's a bad division. Plain
All right, I'm not going to disagree with you there.
I mean, David Ross doesn't want to hear about that. Other people over there at 1060 West Addison, they don't want to hear about it. That division sucks. And up in Milwaukee, the Brewers, they've had a lot of key people out for a long time. They had Christian Yelich out of the lineup. He's back in there, and the games they've been winning have been largely because of him. And then as far as the Cardinals, they looked like they were going to run away and hide in this division, and they had a bad stretch. I mean, the month of May, they were terrible, just like the Cubs were very good in the month of May. And then you talk about the Reds. We knew the Reds' bullpen was terrible. We knew their pitching staff was okay, but the Reds, they have a lot of offense, and their bullpen just blows.
You know, it really is amazing. The National League Central, the pitching overall in that division, including the Cubs. I mean, the Cubs pitching has surprisingly been better than what I thought it would be going into the season. Bullpen.
Except against the Marlins over this weekend. Today it was fine. Today they got a really good performance, but this was just like the series with the Giants. Lose the first 3 games and then salvage the finale. And all of a sudden they're saying, okay, we got it all set. No, you don't. You won 1 game after you lost 3. I mean, give me a break.
Do you think the Cubs would be buyers if they're in the same position they are at the trading deadline as they are right now?
It will be up to Mr. Ricketts. If Mr. Ricketts decides that they still have a chance and they want to go for it, but they might just kind of, I don't know. I don't think they're going to have to sell out, but I think they're going to keep everything. Guys like Baez, Contreras, Bryant, I don't think they're going to get rid of these guys. Do you?
Not where they are in the standings as of right now. I thought
first place. It's not going to be 1997 White Sox all over again,
which was the white flag trade.
Yeah.
No,
after they won the division 3 years later in 2000, Mr. Reinsdorf says that white flag trade that that's the reason we just won this division. Then they went into the playoffs against Seattle, and they ended up getting swept 3-0.
No, I don't think they're going to trade any of those players that you mentioned if they're where they are at the trading deadline. But like I said all along, I thought Craig Kimbrell would certainly be trade bait and would really restock your minor league system. But again, if they're where they are at the trading deadline, which is at the top of the division, no, I don't think they're going to do it. Because let's face it, Les, I mean, the Dodgers were supposed to run away and hide from the entire Major League Baseball standings this season. They're not. So I guess
San Diego looked like they were going to, and now they're struggling too. They did win today over the Reds 3-2, but San Diego, they're not doing well at all.
Who thought the Giants would be the class of the National League West this season? And, you know, if you take a look around Major League Baseball, there's been a lot of surprises. So I don't know. Last year was an aberration, the whole 60-game schedule. And even though the Dodgers won, I'll never remember them winning unless I look it up in a book somewhere down the road. This year might be the same thing.
Well, no doubt about that. By the way, Montreal has gone ahead of the Tampa Bay Rays 1-0 at the end of the second period. They're up 2-1. If Montreal holds serve and wins at home, they could have Tampa Bay in real big trouble. Everybody said Tampa Bay is a heavy favorite. But right now the Canadians, they got a great overtime win the other night when they were badly outshot and outplayed. And no Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup since Montreal did it in '93 when they beat Wayne Gretzky in L.A.
Okay, let's correct one thing of what you just said. It's the Lightning, not the Rays playing hockey.
I'm used to saying Rays. You're right. But the Tampa Bay right now are the defending Stanley Cup champs. That we don't have to correct.
I think Dave Wills would still be able to do hockey if he had to, though, don't you?
He worked with me. We did hockey games together.
That's right, UIC.
When the basketball team was out of town and I was with them, he would stay in town here and do the hockey team, and he was great. And he was great to work with, too.
All right, speaking of postseason, let's talk about the NBA real quickly, and I'm taking a look at the scoreboard. They're starting the fourth quarter. This is another Game 7. We'll talk about the other Game 7 from last night in a second. Atlanta, it's very early now in the fourth quarter. Atlanta's got a 3-point lead over Philadelphia. It's been a crazy postseason in the NBA. A lot of injuries, obviously, that obviously affected the series with Brooklyn. But, hey, Milwaukee took advantage, and that's what you're supposed to do.
No doubt about it. I mean, Giannis is healthy right now, and he was able to do a lot of things. And there's no doubt KD was terrific on the other side. But if that team from Brooklyn was healthier, I think they would have won that series, and I think they'd win the NBA. I think they could have beaten the Lakers even if they had a healthy whole situation all the way around. And I'm still really, really glad the Lakers got knocked out in the first round where everybody said, oh, if you got LeBron, he doesn't lose in the first round. Oh, really? I beg to differ with them.
Well, and all those who want to put Michael against LeBron, you know, the Michael people can now use that also.
That's complete garbage. Come on, give me a break on that. I mean, Michael and Scotty combined 6-0 in NBA Finals series. 6-0. LeBron has lost what, about 4 times in the NBA Finals, something like that, maybe
No,
5.
Six.
I'm talking NBA Finals rounds.
6.
Yeah. So come on, don't try to tell me that. And then they're doing this thing about the goat versus the duck for this new Space Jam thing. He's not the goat.
Hey, speaking of Scottie Pippen, did you see that Scotty's going to write a book because he was so upset with the Last Dance 10-part documentary that he wants?
And he also was mad that the Bulls fired him as I guess Konashovich and the new front office decided to remove him. He's out.
Okay, well then he'll have a lot to say in this book, and you know what? I'll try and get a free copy, of course. But if I don't, I still might buy the book, and it might be interesting reading.
Well, it'd be more than interesting. It'll be a lot of fun to take a look at. What is he going to say about Michael? I mean, those two have always gotten along great, but what's he going to say about him?
I know
this much. When he pulled the 1.8 seconds thing against the Knicks, the Bulls ended up winning that game anyway. But from Birmingham, Alabama, where he's playing baseball, I remember what Michael said. He said, Scotty's acting like an ass. Remember that?
Well, not only that, but he said, he criticized Scotty in the 10-part documentary, The Last Dance. He criticized Scotty for that and one other thing that I can't remember what it is right now. So I think Scotty was a little upset with Michael's criticism, and that's when I think he decided, you know what, I'm going to get my story out there, my side of the story, and he's going to write a book. And like I said, it'll be really interesting to see what he says.
It'll sell. It just won't sell as much as Michael would, but that's understandable. But there's still plenty of fans of Scotty here in Chicago because they won 6 titles. He was involved in all of them. It wasn't just Michael. Scotty was on all those teams too. The first 3, they had Horace Grant. They had John Paxson. And they had Bill Cartwright. The second 3, they had Rodman. They had Steve Kerr. They had so many other, and Luke Longley and whether. Bottom line is, Michael and Scotty were on all 6 teams, period. End of story. And anybody that wants to say, oh, LeBron, this, you're one of 2 things. Either you're really young or you're stupid.
All right, let's change topics. Before we get to our walk down memory lane segment and also Stump the Grobber, I just wanted to ask you, because I think we talked about this or skirted it a little bit. Give me who's the nicest athlete you ever dealt with, Les, and also then the meanest athlete you ever dealt with.
Meanest, boy. I would say that there's a lot of people you could put in that situation that were really, really bad. I know who you think it is. It's got to be Keith Hernandez in your point.
For me, yes. That was a guy I got into. Well, it was a one-sided verbal altercation, but yes. But how about you?
Well, no, you said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And he kept yelling, get out, get out, get out. I remember because I was standing right nearby when all that crap was going down. As far as nicest, well, locally here on the Cubs side, Billy Williams. I don't think anybody tops how great a guy he is and still is to this day. I got along great with Ron Santo. I got along great with Ernie Banks. I knew both of them, but Ernie knew me very well. I'll never forget the time I was in Tokyo, Japan, and they had already played the 2 games with the Mets, and the team had already flew back toward stateside and for the rest of spring training to get ready for the regular season. And I was having breakfast on top of our hotel, and I just had finished, and all of a sudden there was a voice yelling, hey, come on over here. It was Ernie. And I ended up sitting talking to him for about an hour to an hour and a half. And we did not talk about baseball at all. It was a talk about life, and it was a great conversation. I'll never forget. From the White Sox side, Paul Konerko and Jim Thome are 2 of the best in most recent years. You covered both of those guys. Both did it. I did as well. And I would say that those 2 are about as good as anybody out there. There were some others. Now, on the Blackhawks side, oh, my gosh, there were just so many. Our late friend Stan Mikita was awesome. Tony Esposito. There were so many other great ones at that point as well. And from the Bulls, Bill Wennington, who we all know very well, and he does color on the Bulls broadcast. We've known him a long time. And I remember when he was playing for Team Canada against the Dream Team, and then eventually he was a member of the Bulls a couple of years later on. But as far as that goes, as far as those players, I think that's pretty much a good start for the list of those that I think were some of the best I ever was with.
All right, a buddy of mine just checked in, so I'm going to give him a shout out to my buddy Marty Zimmerman. Hey, Hector, what's going on? Miss you on the golf course. Hopefully, we can do that again sometime soon. You didn't say you're the meanest athlete you ever dealt with.
Boy, there were just so many. I mean, Albert Bell was terrible, but he wasn't really bad to me. I know some of our colleagues have had some, but he was just a bad person.
Well, he was standoffish. He just didn't want to deal with any of us.
No, he didn't. And he came here for 2 years and got a lot of clutch hits when it didn't matter, when they were out of the race. In 98, the year Sosa did everything, he was mad because Sosa got all the publicity. He's going, what about me? Well, everything you did was when the White Sox were out of contention.
All right, let's move on now, Les. Let's do. Oh, by the way, Alan, get ready to do the video for Nick and Ivy's. We'll get to that right after this walk down memory lane segment. Les, before I talk about a couple of instances from our past, you want to echo anything?
Why don't you do it first?
Okay. All right. Unfortunately, it came into my mind right when I was thinking about this a little earlier today. You go into press boxes, you go into locker rooms, you go into clubhouses. It's not always fun and games, unfortunately. And sometimes, as a
quite the opposite. People don't understand it.
Okay, now sometimes, unfortunately, it's turned out to be life and death. I mean, literally life and death. And there has been a couple of instances where I've had to go into clubhouses after the passing of an athlete. They were both athletes from out of town that were here in Chicago.
They were Cardinals.
Well, one of them was a Cardinal. That was Darryl Kyle, the St. Louis Cardinals. That was the year 2002. And the story there, at least for me, is that the game was being held up at Wrigley. It was a Saturday afternoon game, and the game was being held up, and no one could figure out why.
Joe Girardi finally made the announcement, and he was in tears.
Let me tell the story, and then I'll let you chime in if you can. Anyway, everybody's wondering what the heck is going on. And then finally, I got a call on this one, a person who I knew, because, we were at the Hancock building back then, and the Hancock building was across the street from the Westin. And the Westin is where most of the players from out of town, the teams, I should say, stayed. And I had a contact at the Westin who called me and said, there's been a medical emergency here, and it involved one of the Cardinal players. So now we started piecing it together, unfortunately, that, one of the Cardinal players who was not at the ballpark, left behind, yada, yada, yada. And as it turned out, it was Darryl Kyle, their pitcher, who had, I don't know, some kind of heart problem. I'm not even going to begin to try and guess what it was exactly. It was not drugs. Okay, let me get that out very quickly. And, we found out that, unfortunately, he passed away. I think the police and the medical people had to knock down the door, yada, 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 because he didn't get on any of the buses to come with the team to go to the ballpark. And so, yes, you're right, Les. When they finally announced it, and we got word of it upstairs in the press box first, and then Joe Girardi of the Cubs, he was a player back then, of course, he got on the microphone and very well said, unfortunately, there's been this tragedy, yada, yada, yada. Please go home. Please keep everybody, in your thoughts.
Please show respect for the Cardinals.
Yes, totally that. And then, we had to go down as reporters. We had to go down and talk to some of Darryl Kyle's teammates. And that's not an easy thing to do, as you can well imagine. And that was not the first time that I had to deal with something like that. And the other time was Lyman Bostock, who, came up with the Minnesota Twins his first 3 seasons and then was playing for the Anaheim Angels. And I'm terrible on years, Les. You're probably better at this than I am.
1978. 78.
Okay, so it was very early on in my quote unquote 78. That's what it was, or was it later even?
No, 78.
Okay, very early on in my professional career. And he unfortunately was killed in a drive-by shooting across the state line. I believe it was in
Gary, Indiana.
And he was killed. And so we had to go in and talk to the players for the Angels, and they were just in shock. And obviously, a lot of them were crying their eyes out, and rightfully so.
Jim Dragosi was their manager at the time.
Okay, that I don't remember. And, Jim's one of the all-time greats, of course. God rest his soul. And Lyman Bostock was a star player. He was only in the major leagues. That would have been part of his fourth season.
He got one of the first free agent contracts for a lot of money after free agency went into effect. And I remember a friend of ours, Kenny McReynolds, gave me a note to hand to Lyman Bostock because he wasn't coming to the game that day. So I handed it to him, and he was very happy that he got the note first. I have no idea what it was, but couple days later, he was gone.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Lyman Bostock was a .311 career hitter in his first 3.5 seasons in the major leagues. Again, the first 3 with Minnesota, and then he moved down to Anaheim. But again, what I'm trying to say, unfortunately, is that it's not all fun and games, and sometimes it is literally life and death. And of course, I remember, we were the last ones to talk to Thurman Munson. The Yankees were in town. And then we talked to Thurman Munson the night before, and then the next day he went home, and I think it was somewhere in Ohio, maybe Columbus. I'm not sure.
It was near the Akron-Canton airport because that's where he flew that plane out of.
Okay, and he was flying the plane, and unfortunately he crashed and died. So, those stories,
There was another incident involving another Cardinal player that passed away. I was in Milwaukee covering a Brewer-Cardinal game, and they had another player. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Another Cardinal had passed away, and I remember the game was played. The Cardinals won the game. Afterward, went down there, and of course, Tony La Russa was managing the Cards at the time. And all I said was, "I'm really sorry that we're meeting under this. Hopefully, things will be a lot better the next time we meet." And he was very friendly about that, all things considered, and because he was obviously they win a lot of times, and they could have a lot of reasons to be in a good mood, and Tony could sometimes be in a bad mood, as you and I both know. But that day, he had every right to be pretty much out of it.
Yeah, I'm spacing out less on names, and my brain is getting worse as time goes on. But that was a pitcher, if I think, and it was involved in a traffic accident, was it not?
It might have been. But all I know is the Cardinals seem to be a jinx team at that point, even though I don't believe in jinxes or hexes or anything like that.
Yeah. All right. Before we get to Stump the Grobber, let us get a word now from our sponsor, Nick and Ivy's Brewery in Lockport.
Hello, this is Paul from Nick and Ivy Brewing Company. We are located at 1026 South State Street in historic downtown Lockport, Illinois. We are very excited to be partnering up with the Fat Mike Chicago Sports Show as well as the 1252 brand because we are one of the few Chicagoland breweries that embrace sports and sports culture. Come in for a fresh brewed beer made right here in Lockport while catching the game of your favorite team. Stay for the live music that we have booked every weekend, or just come for a cozy atmosphere to enjoy a good conversation with a friend, loved one, or complete stranger. Nick and Ivy makes you feel right at home no matter what the occasion is. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook by searching for Nick and Ivy Brewing Company. Visit our website for our up-to-date tap list or to go shopping on our online store at nickivybrewing.com. That's N-I-K-I-V-Y brewing.com. Come in today for a fresh brewed beer born and raised in Lockport, Illinois.
And big happenings at Nick and Ivy's over this past weekend, Les. Fat Mike had a beer, I believe it's a lager, that was named after him. Do you ever have a beer named after you, Les?
Yeah, right. I don't even drink beer.
What food would you like to have named after you? Bruce Levine, our buddy Bruce Levine, he worked at, when he was going to school down at Southern Illinois in Carbondale, and Bruce worked at the sandwich shop there. Boobies was the name of it. Bruce had a sandwich when he was working there named after him.
I believe that. Basically, it either has to be a ribeye or a prime rib. And by the way, we went out for Father's Day on Saturday night, last night, and Kathy took me out for that. I had an awesome piece of prime rib, and that's the way to celebrate it. And oftentimes it's either that or ribeye, and those are the two best tasting pieces of meat that I could find anywhere.
Now, the prime rib, if I remember at Wildfire, don't they have it like in 3 sizes, like the queen?
Yes.
And the size?
I ordered the small one, and it was gigantic. I can imagine what medium or large would have been, but I had one that was huge. And one of the reasons I'm very glad I got one that big, it was a Saturday night. It wasn't the night that I'm going to do either a podcast like this or doing a show on the Score. I don't want to get overly stuffed and be, just worn down by 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. As always, when we do Stump the Grobber, I believe there's an opening for that. So, Alan, if you got it queued up back in the studio, go ahead, let it rip.
What was that?
That doesn't really make sense.
What?
Live and let live.
I'm not familiar with that
It's
expression.
a James Bond.
Doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Of course, I'm alive.
Two queens on casino night. I am going to drop a deuce on everybody.
I just want to say for the record, I did not kill anyone. Stanley was attacked by his own heart.
I know where this is going.
Do you? It's now time for Stump the Grobber on the Grobstein and Schuster Express.
Stump the Grobber, always a staple here on the Grobstein Schuster Express. And Les, like I said, we have a little bit extra time because we didn't have any guests today. So I got a lot of stuff if you're up for it.
Let's try it.
Okay.
By the way, outside here up in Elk Grove Village, we're not even a few days from July 4th. We got fireworks going up, and including right now. So if you hear any explosions in the background, you'll know what it is.
Okay, there's supposed to be some storms coming through the area very shortly, so that it might be one or the other, or it could be both, actually. All right, well, let's start with some nicknames, and I think you'll pass. I'll bet you get all of these nicknames of athletes, and they're pretty well known. So I'll just throw the nickname, and you tell me who the player was.
Go for it.
Crime Dog.
Oh, the crime dog would be Freddie McGriff.
That is
And
correct.
when the Cubs got him, he neglected to come here initially. He stalled. Then when they finally got here, he did nothing. And people keep saying, oh, he's got to be a Hall of Famer. I don't know about that. When he got to the Cubs, he did nothing. And a really nice guy, so I don't really like ripping on him, but he did nothing, and then that team fell apart in 01, and that was the end of that.
He did have 30 home runs one season in a Cubs uniform, though.
That was a year later.
Okay, well, he did at least did it. All right, Iceman.
The Iceman, there's a few that we could go for. There's a few people that could be called that, but we're talking about well, it would not be a hockey player either, correct?
No, it's a basketball player.
Yeah, the Iceman. I'm having a major league brain cramp at this point, but that would be San Antonio Spur, right?
That's right. And he also ended up with the Bulls at the end of his career.
When he was completely washed up, no doubt about that. But
that was George Gervin, and I used to say
Gervin. They had Gervin, and they also had Special K, Larry Keenan on that team.
Right.
He also came to the Bulls late.
That's correct. I used to say about George Gervin, when he ever it was a rare when he had a good game in a Bulls uniform. He's scoring from memory because obviously he was not very good at the end of his career.
When he was a Spur with Keenan, they were great, but they just couldn't guard anybody.
The Rifleman.
The Rifleman at that point, that would be a guy who could just shoot the lights out from outside there. Again, who was it again? I don't feel
Chuck
like
Person.
Chuck Person, of course.
They called him the Rifleman.
He wasn't even called that when he was in college. He was a great college basketball player, but he got that nickname in the pros.
That is correct. All right, the next one's an easy one. The Mailman.
Well, the Mailman would be a guy who, because of Michael Jordan, never won a championship, and that would be Karl Malone. They were Malone and Stockton, and they never won a title. And that I thought after the Bulls team was broken up in 98, 99, I thought that would be their chance, and they got beat by the Spurs, and they didn't get in there.
The Rain Man.
Wow, the Rain Man.
And it was REIGN, Rain Man.
No, you got me on that one.
That would be the guy who fathered a lot of kids. That's Sean Kemp.
Oh my! I didn't know that was indeed his nickname at that point. But
that was his nickname.
I know that everybody said, "Well, Seattle, if they would have been healthy and whatever." Kemp was on that team when the Bulls beat him.
Yep. Big Ticket.
Big Ticket, another NBA guy. Again, who was it?
Played 1 year at Farragut.
Oh, you're talking about KG.
Right, Kevin Garnett. That is correct. The Matrix.
Wow.
This is a little bit tougher one.
You got me on that one.
That's Sean Marion.
Yeah, he was a good player, especially when he was in Phoenix.
All right, another basketball player. The Glove.
Well, the Glove, that would be Peyton.
Gary Payton is correct. How about Big Baby?
Big Baby played with the Boston Celtics and was a good player. I went to Boston for Game 7 of that. Remember that great series the Bulls had with the Celtics? They had never won a game in Boston Garden in the playoff before, but they did. And Big Baby had a couple of big stretches in that series, and he had a big second quarter when the Celtics busted that game open, and that was the end of that.
Went to LSU. We're talking about Glenn Davis. How about, let's see, I got just a couple more. How about the Panda?
The Panda would be a player that is still playing in baseball, and he's a catcher.
More so a third baseman. Was on the Giants championship teams, a couple of them. Pablo Sandoval.
Sandoval, I remember him as much as sometimes catching, though, too.
Okay. I'll give you one more before we get to some other regular questions. How about the Nigerian Nightmare?
I should know that one, too, but you got me on that one.
Big running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, Christian Okoye.
Okoye, and he was a great player, too, by the way.
Yeah, he was. All right, I'll give you some baseball questions real quickly. Who holds the Cubs' single-season record for saves?
For saves in a season, I would say Lee Smith.
Nope.
Not Suter, then.
Nope. Think from the left side.
You got me on that one.
Randy Myers.
Oh, yeah. Randall Kirk Myers.
Do you remember when the fan jumped over onto the field?
Idea for the fan. That's not the guy you wanted to pick. That was Bobby Howard was another guy that a fan ran after. Those are two of the worst guys to try to go after because they both would beat the crap out of you.
All right, how about this one, Les? The last 3 Cubs who have won batting titles, who are they?
Wow. I know that Bill Buckner won 1.
That's 1.
Bill Madlock won 2.
That's 2. Who's the third player?
Who was it?
Derek Lee.
Oh, yeah, D. Lee. That one I never would have gotten.
Okay, this one's going back in time. You may or may not get this one. Who's the only pitcher, Major League history, to win back-to-back MVP awards? MVP awards.
The only pitcher to do it?
Yep. This is a trivia question, a real trivia question.
It wasn't Koufax, was it?
No. I'm just going to tell you this one because this is a real trivia question. The correct answer is Hal Newhouser. He played for the Tigers in 44 and 45. Those were the Warriors, obviously. So
he faced the Cubs in the World Series. The Cubs are in the World Series against
that
him.
Is correct. In the 45 World Series, he got beat in Game 1, but he came back and won Game 5 and Game 7. Now, the reason he won the MVP awards in those 2 years, they didn't have the Cy Young Award yet. That's
why. Did number 1 and number 2. The reason the Cubs were in that was because so many other teams in the National League had players that were overseas fighting World War II. And the Cubs did not have that many players that went over there like some of the other teams did.
All right, a few more real quickly. Who holds the Major League record? And it's not, we'll take Ohtani out of this one because he hasn't done this one. The most career home runs by a pitcher. Career home runs, not Ohtani.
Well, it's got to be George Herman Ruth.
No, as a pitcher, when he pitched. Games that they pitched.
Don Drysdale.
No, but he's up there. Drysdale is up there. He did something like in the 20s. It's another trivia question. It's Wes Ferrell. He played back in the 20s and 30s, and he had 38 career home runs. All right,
I remember Dick Ferrell. His nickname was Turk with the Houston Astros.
That's correct. All right, we'll localize this one. Who holds the Cubs? The top 2 guys for career home runs by a Cubs pitcher. Career home runs, Cubs pitchers.
Zambrano's got to be one of them.
He's number 1. Who's second?
Second, I would say, I'm going to say Fergie Jenkins.
That is also correct. Zambrano had 23 home runs. Jenkins had 13. And then the final question, we'll keep the same question, but we'll go to the south side. Who holds the White Sox career record for most home runs by a pitcher?
Gary Peters might be one of them.
Gary Peters is the answer. 15 career home runs. And I always love Gary Peters because his birthday is the same day as mine. So I don't know. I like him for that reason.
He was the rookie of the year in, I think it was 63, beat out his teammate, Pete Ward.
Okay, now I remember, Les, maybe you remember as well, the White Sox couldn't hit a lick back in those days. I mean, they just had terrible offensive teams. Peters, as a pitcher, they would bat him 6th in the order.
Yeah, they did. And quickly, who was the first position player that they had bat 9th when they moved Peters up a little bit?
I don't know. You have to tell me.
Ron Hansen.
Oh my God. Okay. And to show that Peters was a really good hitting pitcher as a career, and pitchers usually hit underneath 100 overall, especially back in the day. Peters as a career was a .212 career hitter. So the guy could actually hit.
He could hit. He also could field his position really well. We know that guys like Greg Maddux and Jim Cott were great fielding pitchers. Gary Peters is a good fielding pitcher too.
And one of his teammates was Joel Horlin, who also was a good hitting pitcher back in the day.
The last time I talked to Joe Horlin, it was around 1993. I was in Arizona with the Bulls when they were playing the Suns in the finals. But one of those afternoons that there was an off day, I went to an exhibition game. They had the Phoenix Firebirds played their parent team, the Giants, and Joe Horlin was there. And by the way, Barry Bonds hit a home run in that game at Scottsdale Stadium. But I remember before the game, I saw Joe Horlin. I talked to him about a couple of things, including the day that he threw his no-hitter against the Tigers in '60. What a great guy.
Les, I was doing some research the other day, and you'll probably remember this because I don't. Hoyt Wilhelm played for both the Cubs and the Sox.
He was with the Cubs at the very end of his career.
So Juan Pizarro also played for both the Cubs and the Sox.
He was good with the Cubs at the end.
I don't remember.
He pitched a one-hitter against the Padres one day. And in fact, that hit was the only thing that prevented a perfect game. But Juan Pizarro had one really good season with the Cubs. The next year, and eventually they let him go. With the White Sox, he was really good. And he was, by the way, Pizarro was also a very good hitting pitcher.
And the White Sox pitching staff, going way back in my youth when I was a pretty small kid, but it was Peters, Pizarro, Horlin, and I think a young Tommy John too, right?
Yeah, and they also used Johnny Buzzard.
Right.
Yeah, well, it was pronounced Buzzard. We all called him Buzzard, and that turned out it was wrong. It was Buzzard.
Okay. I think on that note, we'll call it quits for the night. Les, I think you did pretty well overall on all these questions. Good for you, man.
Yeah, I should have done better.
Okay. Well, you can always improve next week.
At least
anyway,
I knew Zambrano. At least I knew Big Z.
You did. Good for you, Les. And again, we'll talk to you very shortly next week, of course. And until then, have a great week, everybody.